actually execute this code. We've created it. You can see that the comments are all listed, the methods are all listed, and again, you can access this code on the Moodle site. I'll have it up there, or it has been up there already actually. So I want to run this and see what kind of output I get. So let's do right click again. And a simple way to run is simply going to run as here in Eclipse. If you right click, and you can simply go Python run and it should execute. You can see a shortcut to this here as well. You can press the run or you can go run configurations and you essentially create a new Python run. You could press run and you can see I already did that. So this is the actual run that's referenced here. But I'll show you the shortcut. This is basically a quick shortcut to run it. Essentially right click and press Python run. And so what you can see now is that we've run some code and you get a console automatically created. In this console you'll see some output 0, 1, 2, 3, 6, 10, 14. So obviously, or excuse me, it starts at 25. So 25, 0, 1, 2, 3, 6, 10, and 14. So of course the question is, what exactly is this? Well, let's go back to the code. First, we created something called first. And here it's created as an object with reference to values 3 and 4. So f now is basically an object which has input values 3 and 4. Now remember, we have two variables called r and I within the object. These are coming in and they're being instantiated. So r and I should be 3 and 4, right? So this is I in reference to I, and this is to reference to, or excuse me, r, and this is reference to I. So you can see r is taking real part, which is 3 in this case, and then this I is becoming 4. Now, let's say we want to sort of follow our code and see what's actually happening. A very useful way to do that is simply debugging. Okay, you can see the next method, line 79 here. We're going to call this method called calculate. So I'm going to do something essentially is in my code, which is put a debug line. So oftentimes we have problems in our code, there's some logic that doesn't make sense, and simply trying to understand our code. Debugging is a good way to do that. So we add what's called a breakpoint. A breakpoint is a way for our code to stop in the midstream of its execution. So we add the breakpoint here. So you can see line 40 has what is a breakpoint. So I'm going to run this again, but this time, instead of running in the regular way, I'm going to run it in what's called debug mode, essentially a way to sort of stop your code and look at it while you're executing it. So I'll do again Python run. So I'll run it, but this time we should see a different kind of set of outputs. I'm going to tell it to stop, so hopefully it should stop my code, and there you go. You see the code. What's happened here is that it's essentially stopped my execution. And what's useful about this is that you get this window of variables, and you can see we have these global variables and these sort of variables of our actual object, and so you can see I and R. Remember, we create them earlier, and so the references to those variables are now in the code, or you can see them in your code through this debug mode. So you go into the self, which is reference to the object, and you can see those I and R variables that we created. And so you can see that logic to see if it makes sense as you go through this code. So you can see, for instance, self.r, which is this, that is 3. Is it less than or greater than 5? So obviously 5 is greater than 3. So what should happen is we go into the if part. That is, we should execute the code within if. And sure enough, that's exactly what happens. It goes into if. You can see this highlighted line means that this code is now stepped into. So this step into, or excuse me, step over, and then step into is this one. Step into is a way to sort of go inside a method. Step over means we step over the method or continue beyond the method. So we can go press now step over. That means it'll go to the next line of code that can be executed. It skips the else because the else is automatically not true if the condition, the first condition, is true. So we can continue to press step over because it will execute now this calculation, r times 5. So r has now become 5. You can see that here. So it's an init because I created an integer rather than a float. So 5 times 5 should be 25. And you can see return is a keyword that means that it's going to return the value. So I'm going to press step over as in to execute this line of code without going inside of it. There's no reason to go inside of it. So I'm telling it I want to print the result of that calculate method. So if the calculate method is 5 times 5, it should print 25. And sure enough, That's exactly what you get, right? Print 25, f dot calculate. Now, what I'm going to do is now go into this method because I want to see how this method f dot employee is executed. So stepping into a method is a way to see how employee is executed. So over means you just execute the code and not actually go into a particular method. Stepping into a method means you go inside the method and see how the lines of code are going to be executed. So I, as you recall, is 0 in this case, and that's reference. And so you can see the local variable I is reference. Notice how it's different from the I that's within the object. So we have something called I in the self that is referenced inside the object. That is a float value called 4. The I just created now is an integer called 0. Okay. So while I, self.I, is greater than I, then I want to print I. So that is true, the first condition, because I, which is 0, is certainly less than I, within the self, which is 4. So it should print now the value I. And so yes, you get 0, and I'm going to tell it to add 1 to I. So it's going to have, it is now, you can see the value 1. So I've added 1 to I. This is basically a way to add 1 to I. So basically the plus and equal sign means that I is going to be added to 1. That's one way of doing it. I could have written it differently if I did, for instance, I equals I plus 1. That's another way to do it. So there's different ways to do this, but that's just a simple, quick, shortcut way for me to write it. And you can see we're going to continue iterating, and it'll keep printing so long as the condition is true. Eventually, the condition will not be true, and it should break out of this particular conditional loop. Okay, so you can see now we're back here. We're back to employ. We've printed the first 3 values, which were, of course, less than 4 in this case, and so that's why they printed. So we're going to go to the next method, the for loop. Okay, once again, we step into it. You can see now we've created a list with the following values. Here's our list. You can see the list values, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. And we're going to go into the list. So now we're going to reference a member I in A. So in A being the list. So in the first case, you're seeing that the I is 2. So because the first value in our list is 2, the first member value is 2. So if I is less than 7, so yes, 2 is less than 7, so this condition is true. Now it's going to say, get me the second value of A. So that's not quite the same as number 2, and I'll show you in a moment. So you can see it printed 6. So remember, when you're referencing a member number using this sort of brackets, that's going to get the location of a reference, not the actual reference. So the location I, in this case, was 2, means the second, or the third actually, member. So remember counting in terms of location or placement of where a value is in a list starts from 0. So that means 2 is actually the third value. So 0, 1, 2, that means number 6 is actually referenced by the value 2 here. So that's why it printed 6. And so it does it again. So once again, this time I is 4. The second value is 4. And then I'm now telling it to get the fourth, or really the fifth member within A. So that means it should print 3, 4. So that means what prints 12, I think. Let's see, or 10. Oh, sorry, miscounted. 10 is the fifth output, or number 4 in this case. So it's counting from 0. So I, in this case, is 4, which means it's actually the fifth member, or 10 in this case, and so we printed 10. And again, I iterate over it, and you can see this time I is 6, so we should print once again since I is less than 7. So yes, we printed 14. So so sixth member is basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That was number 14. So really the seventh member. So it printed 14. Now we're going to get another one. So in this case, int is 8, so that means 7 is certainly not greater than 8, so it should not print. The condition is false, so it doesn't print. It checks again because there's another member in the list. That is not true as well, and it check again, I guess, and keeps going. You can see finally it finishes. So we've completed the execution of this. And so now we've finished the execution of the code, so you can see no more methods are referenced or called in our code, so we should be done with the execution. And now we've printed out all the expected values we should see. So 25, 0, 1, 2, 3, 6, 10, and 14. Okay, so that's how you run some simple methods in a class.